Welcome to the Affirming Minds Podcast, where we equip like-minded mental health professionals with a therapeutic toolkit that helps add to a more engaging, fulfilled, and effective mental health practice. Each empowering episode can stand alone as a continuing education pod course or a very valuable professional or personal resource with insightful expert interviews, practical resources, industry news, and lots of inspiration. We help the modern therapist thrive at work. Now let's welcome your host, a dedicated therapist and passionate educator, Shaina Siber, LCSW.
Welcome to the Affirming Minds Podcast. I'm your host, Shaina Siber. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to share some important disclaimers. This podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional treatment or clinical supervision. If you're in need of those services, please reach out to a licensed mental health professional. Confidentiality is always a priority. Any clinical examples shared in this episode are de-identified, composites, or clinical vignettes, ensuring that no real client or patient health information is ever disclosed. If you're interested in earning continuing education credits for listening to today's episode, visit affirmmentalhealth.com to learn more about our membership options. Our membership includes CEs for live virtual workshops, self-study webinars, and pod courses via the Affirming Minds podcast. Today, we're diving into a conversation that every clinician, supervisor, and mental health leader should hear. We're talking about clinical supervision, not as a formality, but a vital, dynamic process that can elevate the quality of care we provide, shape who we become as professionals, and actually protect us from burnout. I'm joined today by the incredible Dr. Ashley Stevens, a board-certified licensed clinical social work supervisor, licensed in 9 states and actively supervising in 5. Ashley holds a doctorate in industrial and organizational psychology, a master's in social work, and a background that spans the VA system, private practice, executive coaching, and organizational leadership. She has worked with combat veterans, trained clinicians in cultural competency and trauma-informed care, and led leadership development initiatives for both emerging and seasoned professionals. Her mission as a supervisor is to train not only ethical, skilled therapists, but also empowered clinicians who are building lives and careers that serve them. Together, we unpack what quality supervision actually looks like, how it helps clinicians grow their confidence and competence, how it can become a safeguard against ethical drift and burnout, and why supervision is one of the most impactful spaces for professional development and mentorship. We also talk about the realities of supervising across multiple states and what clinicians and supervisors alike need to understand about licensing laws, continuity of care, and doing this work responsibly. And we explore what it means to build supervisory relationships that are rooted in transparency, trust, and shared humanity. In today's episode, we'll explore why external supervision can offer both clarity and protection, how burnout shows up in supervision and what we can do about it, the ethical and practical considerations of supervising across state lines, and how to structure supervision in a way that's grounded in values, transparency, and trust. So whether you're supervising someone right now, considering stepping into that role, or looking to be more intentional about your own supervision journey, this episode is here to support you. So let's get into it. Dr. Ashley Stevens, I am so glad to have you with us today on the Affirming Minds podcast. Ashley, maybe I could just start by asking you to introduce yourself to our audience and share a little bit about how supervision has shaped your career clinically and professionally.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And of course, as you've talked about, I am a clinical social worker as well as an industrial and organizational psychologist, which I have to explain to most people. So I'll just do a really quick explanation on that. So industrial and organizational psychology, we call it IO, is basically the psychology of people at work. And the reason that I went into that kind of avenue, even though I'm very much still professionally a social worker and do things as a social worker, one of the things that I was struggling with was really trying to get at that system change, that macro change, those higher levels of change and really just improvement that I wanted to do as an individual social worker that I couldn't quite get to. But when I found it, which was quite late in life, I really was like, oh, this is everything that I've been searching for. This is like kind of the meaning behind why and how people are happy at work. People want to leave. intentions to leave, hiring, firing, evaluation, anything you can relate to in the work world. And you'll see, as we talked about some of this content, supervision specifically, you'll get the flavors of why and how the research informs how I do supervision and where I do supervision. So to back up to the very beginning, I have been a supervisor for a few years, but a social worker for over 14, working on 15. So it's been a while. And I did not do supervision for a really long time because I was so unsure and unstable with what I had received. And this is not to say my supervisors did the best they could, but I grew up as a social worker in the VA. And in the VA, most of the time, that is covered for you. And they're also likely in your same program. So I had a clinical supervisor, but that was also my boss. Those boundaries between, is this clinically related? Is this about a client that we're talking about? Or is it about some policy at work or some managerial item or some administrative item? So I was really, I don't know that I want to be a supervisor like that. And then, as you'll hear, that is not at all what I do. I am only an external supervisor, which means I don't work where any of my people work. Clinically, it took a long time for me to go into the clinical route because I was working in more of a case management program. And I just got really comfortable in that role. I'm a little late to the game. And I think that informs a lot of what I do and how I do supervision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you bringing up that systemic issue that I really don't think is talked about enough. And I think that is such a common experience for people both as that are working as therapists in community mental health organizations, in group private practices, is that often the person delivering the clinical supervision is their supervisor, is their boss, and might have other priorities besides their clinical fluency in the case. There might be
Yes.
task-oriented regulation components. And I remember a lot of the supervision that I received in community mental health. We had such massive caseloads and they had regulatory requirements about how certain cases were monitored. So it was very much like a task supervision of how are you maintaining your caseload and your paperwork requirements. And then there would be this clinical piece that was really about management in this of high risk cases from more of a safety regulation policy perspective, not necessarily getting to the clinical meatiness that I was really craving. And I think one of the pieces that happens for a lot of folks is they wind up seeking out additional clinical supervision outside of what is provided organizationally because this is a limitation. And we're both social workers, not necessarily compensated as we should be in all settings and spaces. So for some people, that is just financially not available. So I think being able to really think about the organizational limitations and structures that shape supervisory experiences is so important. And it sounds like that's something you've been very tuned into in this journey.
Yes.
When did you start to really first recognize supervision as a tool for improving client outcomes and professional growth for clinicians?
Yes. Bad news. It was when I was burning out from my job. But when that kind of I guess, desperation, really, probably the vast majority of clinicians at this point have struggled with burnout. And I think we'll talk about that a whole lot more because it's a huge topic in our field and in the world. But I really had this kind of realization that I no longer could hang in the federal system. And this was a number of years ago. And one of the things, I was working in a smaller town in my hometown, and I went to a bigger city for more opportunity. And I was like, maybe it's just, not that I'm a big fish by any means, but maybe I've tasted all the water in this little pond and I just need to go find bigger seas. And I went and I was like, oh, great. It's the same. It's me. It's not this system. It's not these operations at work. It's me. I'm not designed, I'm not built for this. So as I was burning out and recovering from that, that's when I entered the world of a true clinical, like doing more mental health on my own terms in private practice, doing my own thing. And I also knew that if you ask anyone I went to a master's program with, they would be like, Ashley, a therapist? No, it was never on my radar. It was not my 5-year plan. It wasn't in my 50-year plan. So that was a really good job. And I also knew that there was no way in hell I could do it for 40 hours a week, 30 hours a week, maybe even 25 was pushing it. But I know that I needed to shift my brain a little bit and have a lot of different things that I could get myself into. So supervision was sometimes in the back of my head. And this was the point where I was like, oh yeah, like people do this for a living. People make money doing this. It's not just, I grew up in the social work field and these people were not compensated. They were voluntold to help me along. But there is such a thing as external supervision. And I also think it was part of living in Texas versus North Carolina. Things are a lot different and different in every state. So I really started to see this as a potential, not really career, but like different shift in a day. I could do a couple of therapy sessions. I could do a couple of supervision sessions. I could also do anything else I wanted to do, teaching, training, speaking, consulting, you name it. I've done it. So really that burning out and that realizing that I don't just have to stick in the box that social workers are often placed into and say, this is all you can do. Get used to it, get over it. But that's what you're good for. That's what you trained for. Get after it. So now for my professional growth, for my clinical skills, for my life well-being, it's been an endless benefit. And that's why I do so much speaking and engaging about it, because I just think that it can be a thing that turns people's burnout around, that turns people's passion around, that really helps reinvigorate our field and gives back to our field. So I created my whole business around supervision. The name of one of my businesses is Epsiode Licensure Supervision. So I really believe in supervision as a way to not only heal burnout, but also just live a life that you deserve as a person who's dedicated your life to service.
I really love that for a lot of reasons, but I think I feel very also passionate about developing resilience around burnout recovery and all of these important pieces. And I think one piece you're speaking to that I think really is important for us to hold on to is really understanding our unique gifts and contributions. And I think you really spoke to this idea that I think most people attracted to social work and a lot of these helping professions and mental health fields, they want to be of service, they want to have impact, they want to contribute. And oftentimes, depending where they land educationally, they might get very specific messages about this is like what your lane needs to be. And I think taking that inventory of what lights me up, what actually energizes me, what actually feels aligned with my values. And I think a lot of times people, when they get burnt out, they either are sort of job hopping or they're leaving the field. And I think this sort of curiosity of, no, like your clinical knowledge, all of these skills that you've acquired aren't necessarily things that are only applicable to this very one sort of expression. And now you were talking specifically about the application of psychotherapy, but how can we pull out more broadly and think about your unique gifts and contributions and how they can do that? And it sounds like you really found a piece of that. One is that in clinical supervision itself and being able to provide that guidance and insight and zoomed out perspective to people, but also saying, oh, I'm the kind of person who maybe needs to be doing a variety of things to be my best self professionally, that I need to have a variety of interests and contributions. So I think that's so important to hear. Something I've been also talking about is I think there's a lot of pressure on therapists and mental health clinicians right now to niche down, like it's super, super specific into one little space where they have mastery. And I think you just sharing that also said, because I'm very much like that. Like I am maybe neurodivergence, maybe just like my own unique gifts. Like I have a lot of different things that interest me. And I think being able to say, no, actually, that could be okay. Why don't you lean into that versus maybe trying to apply force to show up in this very specific way because we're being told this is the only way?
Yes. Yes. And I say your inability to focus on one thing may just be your superpower and what enables you to be the best at whatever 64 things that you want to do. I think this idea of multitasking, specifically for women, which is social work, right, is primarily female, that idea of you should be able to do 57 things all at once. And no, that's not what science says. That's not what research says. But for our neurospicy friends, that actually maybe not right all at the same time, maybe not. But the ability to shift my brain and to say, okay, I've done an hour of really heavy, hard trauma focused therapy in the morning. And then I get to talk with one of my supervisees who's studying for her exam and she's almost done and she's at the tail end and she's going to create her own company. And so I'm going to talk to her about how to create a company and how to be successful and how to get that bag and make sure she's living a good life. There's so many different kinds of conversations that I have in a day. And even when I'm talking about setting up a day like that, I get pumped. There's never a day, I don't have the Sunday scaries. There's never a day where I go, ew, I didn't want to do that. And if I don't want to do something, I go, what other string can I pull on? What other thing do I have in the works that I can do instead of this one thing? Whether that's for money or for joy or for rest, whatever. But having those options that you're not just scripted, this like 8 to 5 is what you do every single day. And then you have your 5 to 8 where you do something else, probably a side hustle, maybe taking care of your kids or your dogs or whoever. Getting out of that kind of hamster wheel is everything to me. And if I can be one person in the field of people that are following that trail, not that it's bad. If that's what you want to do, please do it. But if you're finding that I think I'm wrong for this, I think I'm not doing what everyone else is doing and I feel weird or crazy or broken, look to me. And if I can do it, you can do it. I am no one special. I promise you. I'm just a person who lucked into finding a lot of different things that bring her joy. And I think anyone can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you see as some of the key clinical benefits of supervision for both supervisors and supervisees?
Yeah. Benefits. Clinical outcomes come from rested, rejuvenated, passionate clinicians, and you will never convince me otherwise. I get that our clients, our customers, our patients, whatever you call them, are what we're all here for. I agree. Without them, what are we doing? But you can't tell me that someone who is living their best life as a clinician won't impact the 50, 100, 500 clients that person will interact with this year, this decade, this millennia. Our well-being has ripple effects outwards. I know for me, maybe it's because I have a face that won't lie to you, even if even if I'm trying to pretend like something isn't going on, you'll be able to see it on my face. But my clients, they're humans and we're humans and we get to have our humanity be in the room with us. We're not just like slates. We're not just robots. So the ability to have our clients be like, yeah, you look happy. You're here with me in this space. I can tell that you're not thinking about all the 84 things that you have to do. You're not burnt out and overwhelmed and fatigued with doing this work. So a good clinician is a good outcome. You will produce good outcomes. So supervision is one of those things for me that enables me to, again, get out of my therapist brain all the time and do other things, which makes me happier, healthier. For supervisees and for people who are in this process, you should have the ability to have that safe space to talk about all of the hard things that you're going through as you're providing these services. It's not therapy, but it's an ability to say, ooh, I think I messed up when I did this intervention. I think I did this not the best way. How do I do this moving forward? your supervision practice should be maybe not what we experienced in our supervision. Of this isn't about, am I following the dress code and am I doing insurance notes right and all that? It should be the clinical growth of that supervisee. And so when you can show up to this session and get the help specifically for those clinical avenues and for the things that you're struggling with, and maybe even some of the business kind of aspects of it. I'm expected to have 35 clients a week and I'm struggling. How do I do this and still care about each individual person? Or how do I remember who's who if I have 50 clients by caseload? That should be good supervision, should give you the opportunity to improve and grow clinically for both. And that's one of the reasons that I am such a fan of supervision too, is that supervision keeps me with it with the young kids these days. I have a lot of folks that are older in supervision, but I also have quite a few that are in their kind of young or mid 20s. And they just learned how to do our work. My information from grad school is now 15 years old. So we didn't talk about DE&I when I was in grad school. I don't even know if the term existed. One of the things that I love about it is they're bringing stuff to me and saying, oh yeah, this therapeutic modality is getting a lot of research. Tell me, I'll do my research. I'll look into it. I'll look at the studies and all those kinds of things and formulate a plan. Maybe that's something you need to be sent for more training on if it's of interest to you. So it also keeps you as the supervisor more engaged with what's newer, what's on the edge, what's trending, and keeps you, I think, just more plugged into what's up, rather than, as sometimes those clinicians that have been around a while are like, oh, I know how to do this. I'm an old hat. I've been doing this for a while. And maybe you lose some of that kind of up to speed knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that, also people bringing that information to you and you saying, oh, okay, I need to go do more research about that. I need to get myself educated on that. So it's that entryway to that what's going on, boots on the ground clinically, but now let me get the exposure and the knowledge so I can support my supervisees through it. And I think that I've been in the seat of the supervisor and supervisee, and that piece that you were saying about that, the trickle down impact of burnout and supervisors holding multiple roles and multiple hats and being burnt out themselves. But I think when you can make that space to really make yourself available to say, what are the needs of my supervisees? What do I need to know to best support them at this moment in time as mental health is evolving and always will be evolving? So definitely appreciate that. What are your thoughts about how supervision can support supervisees in fostering their own clinical competency and their ethical decision-making in practice?
I think that you should probably be chatting about competency and ethics in every single supervision, maybe. Obviously, there's going to be a difference between when you first start supervision. I do some supervision course in the same sexes. And one of the things we split it into 3 phases or stages. The first stage is your first 6 months, maybe your first year, depending on have you ever done this before? Did you have an internship where you did actively therapy? What's your work side? Are you getting a lot of experience in this? So it's getting them up to speed with being a fully kind of independent clinician and getting ready for them to be fully independently licensed on their own. And then the longer you stay in that supervision, hopefully you're making a lot less decisions as a supervisor for them. Maybe in the beginning, they're coming to you and saying, I don't know how to do X, Y, or Z. And you're like, okay, let me tell you how to do X, Y, or Z. But in 1.5 years, getting to that 2-year mark, it should hopefully be a lot less of you assessing their competency and really teaching them ethics. Then it becomes, you're telling me what you think about the ethical dilemma that you're in. So it shifts from this, let me give you advice and guidance, to then I ask the questions and my supervisees are sick of it. I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, no, you're doing it again. And no, but for real, you're almost ready to fly. What do you know? What have you picked up over these 2 years or 18 months or whatever? What do you think about that ethical dilemma? Because I have my own thoughts and perspectives, but that's what makes ethical dilemmas so fun and terrible all at the same time is it's a gray area and you get to have a thought and opinion about that as well. So I brainstorm a lot in the beginning and I give one of the things I say too, it's really funny. My supervisees will ask the question and my answer is always, it depends. And I say, are we talking about, let's just say, for example, they say a client can no longer afford therapy. Can I offer them reduced rates? And my answer is, that depends. What is your policy at the place that you're working say? If you are owning your own practice, which you can do in some states, there's provisionally licensed, then you do get to decide. But most often people are working in an organization in community mental health or in a practice of some variety. What do the practice policies say? What does the code of ethics say? What does your state board say? And then maybe last, if you haven't gotten an answer between all of those kind of layers, what do you think? What feels right? What feels the best for that client? And so I no answer is an easy answer, but it's all wrapped up in those like, how are you going to decide for yourself when I am no longer got the reins for you and you're just driving this boat yourself? What are you going to do? What do you think you should do? What do you want to do? And that I think is just really cool. It's a cool place to watch people transition from your mentee, your supervisee to just your colleague. And that is what I am growing every single supervisee to become is my equal. Yes, I have a PhD. I have 15 more years of experience minimally than anyone else. Like, that's all well and good. But you're my colleague. You're my now networking. What are you going to grow up to do? What niche, like you talked about earlier, what specific population or group of people are you going to be working with that I can then refer people to you? That's what I want to grow you into. So if I'm holding the reins and, I think you need to do this and do that, I'm stifling your competency and your decision to make or your ability to make decisions for yourself. And I'm also not allowing you to flex your ethical wings and see what feels right for you. And sometimes that means you're going to make a mistake and have to learn from it. And sometimes it means we're going to guide you a little more because that's really risky or it puts somebody at danger or something else. But good supervision is going to give you the room and the space to learn and grow, not have it done for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're bringing up such important questions about the context. And I think that's something that no matter what stage you are in clinical practice, it's something that's forever going to be coming up. And also that you may be serving multiple bodies of regulation. You might have a direct supervisor, an institution that you're under, your a personal regulatory board, the insurance companies. And sometimes those things are actually like in direct contrast with each other, especially people increasingly being licensed in multiple states and regulatory boards saying different things on different issues, giving people those things of what questions are you asking yourself? What things are you considering? And how do you navigate this? And like coming back to your own sort of practice values and starting to establish that, because I think there's many things in our field that are not falling neatly into the black or white, that they very much live in the gray. And then we have to develop our clinical stance and our sort of ethical perspective and do our best, right? And do our best to make sometimes tough calls and imperfect decisions of the lots of choices that may be available. So it sounds like you're starting to get them thinking about what do you need to ask yourself or be thinking about to make this call versus saying, let me feed you the answer, or this is what I would do. And also using your personal understanding of their level of training and competency and how far they've come to say how directive versus letting them be a bit more autonomous and making that call. I know you've already been speaking to this, but I think it definitely bears repeating and emphasis, how burnout is such a huge issue in our field. How do you see supervision being leveraged to prevent burnout for supervisees and maybe even for supervisors?
Yeah. So supervision is the way that I reduced and ultimately eliminated my own burnout. It allowed me that diversification of income. It allowed me to take my practice multi-state. I'm licensed currently in 8 states. I supervise in 5, although my 8 used to be 12, so I'm down. You know, and hopefully with the multi-states, the licensing compact and things, that will be one day in the past where I have to have all of these state licenses. But supervision is also a platform to use to go across state lines and to expand your practice. If you're already working in multiple states as a clinician, that's also another way of, oh, this is a whole other avenue that I can use in these states. That it's so good in that it gives you that kind of 40,000 foot view and being able to get out of that like emotional heaviness. Now, your supervisees may be in it, and that is part of my goal in supervision is to give you the tools, the resources, the knowledge, particularly to identify what burnout looks like, to call it out when you're seeing it in your own self as the supervisee, to maintain healthy workload, to make sure that you have some sort of hobby or joy in your life and not just 17 jobs in order to make as much money as humanly possible. So in supervision, I think it is very appropriate. And one of the focuses that I have is as a burnout researcher to let them know what it is, what it may look like, how it feels, how to prevent if possible, and certainly how to take care of themselves if they're in it. And one of those things to me is you mentioned job hopping earlier. My goal for you is not to get a rep in the world as like somebody who's going from job to job, but I certainly do advocate for if your job is garbage and they treat you like garbage, give them the food. There are plenty of jobs out there. And if you need help on figuring out which way you want to go, give me a call. I will help you out. But we deserve a good, healthy workplace. And when I talk about burnout, one of the things, if you take nothing else from what comes out of my mouth, my research was on basically putting burnout in the realm of who it belongs to, which is not you or I. It's not the individual. Do we individually feel burnout? Is it wholly? I was an N of 1 when I went through burnout. No one else burns out like I burn out. No one else gets triggered like I get triggered. We're each on an individual journey, and our burnout is ours alone, but it's not your fault. And it's a occupational syndrome, meaning it's not burnout if it's at home, if it's in any other situation other than work. It is a work-related issue. So what about your work is making it feel unsustainable and unlivable? And I talk about that in my supervision. So as a supervisee, if you haven't been chatting with us about burnout and about what's too high for caseloads, what's unlivable, what's unsustainable in this field, bring it up. Put it on the agenda if you have an agenda. My motto for my supervision practice is if you're burned out or leave the field, and the research says it's about 58% of people who start the process never finish their supervision and become fully licensed. That's a huge percentage that we're losing. So if you're burned out or if you leave the field before your student loans are paid off, I have failed as a supervisor. I have not done what I needed to do to get you to a place where this is livable. So if you're finally an LCSW or whatever the full licensure in your state is, if you get there and you're like, oh, hang it up, I'm done, I haven't prepared you for the realities of this field. And I certainly haven't done a good job helping you figure out what your best self looks like. And that is something that I think we can't talk about burnout enough, and addressing it in the room, making sure that your supervisees know that you're a safe place as a supervisor to chat with them about this, I don't think can be understated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that because I think a lot of the burnout rhetoric is overly emphasizing self-care and
Yes.
I really appreciate, and maybe that's a bit of a call to action for other supervisors or people in leadership positions, of recognizing those systemic drivers of burnout and how are we being cognizant and minimizing them, ideally eradicating them in the systems that we work, versus making our clinical members feel responsible for holding untenable workloads or untenable working environments, whether that is workloads being too high or blatant unfairness in the system, or many of these other kind of components that just make this really difficult. What do you see as best practices in terms of structuring supervision to make sure that it remains clinically focused, that it remains effective, that we are safeguarding our supervisees around the occupational risks inherent in our field related to burnout and other issues?
Yes, such a good question. And maybe the biggest struggle with people, first of all, some states don't require any coursework, any training, any additional things. North Carolina, I'm looking at you, bud. I love you so much, but geez Louise. All you have to do is be a LCSW for 2 years, and then you can supervise anybody any way you want. And there's no real regulatory practices about that. Now, some other states like Texas, for example, Oregon is a great one. They have a lot of rules and regulations around what it is and what it's not. And I used that and created my practice in those more kind of restrictive. So I tell, and normally I don't have to. I think sometimes people think this is a bigger issue than it is. It's very rare in my practice, and I've had over 20 supervisees at one time. But it's not therapy. Get a therapist. Supervisor, supervisee, get a therapist. If you are finding that inside of your supervision session, it goes more of that kind of emotional, mental health way, we need to chat about getting resources and support for that person. This is hard work. I think that there is nothing, it's not a risk to me, or it doesn't hurt my feelings in any way if this person's like, you're not all I need to make it. That's a win to me. First of all, this isn't therapy. And please really try to limit the kind of task that what you're talking about earlier, that kind of like task supervision. This is a very specific and, in my opinion, sacred task to grow clinicians well. It takes some work. And yes, they're postmasters. They have education. They have some experience. They have their internships and all of that. But it should be about making sure that the minute that they're done with this process, they are good to go. And that you trust that their skills, their competencies, their ethics, and their morals are on point in order to be a member of this profession. And this might not be a popular opinion, but you should be a gatekeeper. If you're letting any old body who wants to make it through supervision, maybe take a look in the mirror and say, if you wouldn't go to them as a client, maybe think about whether this is somebody who needs a little more extra training, a little more extra modality work, or maybe even therapy. I've definitely had a couple of folks that are like, they start talking to me and I'm like, nope, I am not your therapist. With all the love, that's not my role here. And really saying that out loud, I think, is really important.
I really appreciate that. And I think that's one of the harder things to name, but I think it's so important. I was recently teaching a boundaries course for our continuing education program. And one of the things that I think is really, it's unsettling, it's upsetting. Every year, there's a huge amount of board violations for sexual harassment by therapists, by boundary violations by therapists. And this is talking about like really like egregious ethical violations. And then we're talking about all the people that go to therapists where harm is done for all sorts of reasons. And then that's not even just including the people who like just maybe have really people who aren't skillful or are not attuned and are just maybe they're not actively doing harm, but they aren't helping. And when people are seeking out in distress and crisis and they're not getting any sort of like movement, I think that is also arguably harm in some way. So It's not an easy thing to do, but when we recognize that a person may not have readiness to really independently provide care to clients and do it safely and do it effectively, that's also one of those, like you said, the sacredness, like with this sacred responsibility. You're protecting your supervisees, but you're also having to protect the clients, patients, customers that will ultimately be served and the profession. So I don't think that's spoken about enough, because I think, of course, we recognize how difficult this work is. And I think the overwhelming majority of people are so well-meaning and they do the work and are capable and going to do a wonderful job. But I think, yeah, if you're taking on this responsibility, also know that's also being able to make those difficult decisions when someone is struggling or is not ready.
Yes. And I hope, and I think that's also one of the benefits. Maybe there's both. The external supervision, I have the ability to say, I won't see you. I won't sign off on your hours. I'm not going to take your money. I'm not going to do this with you until you X, Y, or Z. And I have said that. Get a therapist has been one of those things I've said. You're going through a lot, and I think it is leaking out onto your client work, or you're getting triggered. Or let's say you're going through a divorce and one of your clients comes to you and says, I'm cheating on my wife. What your ability to regulate in that room is really important and vital to doing good work, whether it's get a therapist or you need more training on cultural competence or diversity or working with people from Afghanistan, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I have the ability to say, you've displayed to me that there's some gap here that we need to fill before we move on. And maybe you have that as an internal supervisor, somebody who is told by work that you have to do this or be this. But in my experience, you have a lot less authority and power because maybe you're actually their supervisor too. And then there's other kind of dual relationship-y stuff that we could chat about. But maybe you're not that person. You're outside their program or whatever, and you don't want to get them in trouble or tattletale on them or whatever else. And it may just be impossible for you to say, this is what you need before we continue on. But if you do have the ability, or if you can recommend, say it. If you see something, say something. Get that person as much help as possible so that our clients are, at the end of the day, that's what this is about. An unchecked power and authority, which is, let's say it out loud. That's what us as clinicians, we have authority in the ring. Clients trust us and put their faith in us and think of us as the experts. So if we're just letting that go when we see red flags, you're not doing what you should as a supervisor. And maybe I'm going to say the same thing to supervisees. If you think your supervisor is not doing what they should, they're missing sessions, they're writing down that they checked your hours when they didn't, they're not reading your notes or doing case consultation with you, say something. Go to your board, go to their boss. If they're internal, do what you need to do to get good supervision too. It's not just about supervisors having the say.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point in terms of also supervisees. If they feel like they're getting suboptimal supervision or they're not having their supervisor pull their weight or fulfill their requirements, that they also should use their voice to name that and call that out. So you mentioned multi-state licensure previously. Can you maybe speak through like how that might impact supervision, and what are some of the clinical or ethical considerations supervisors should keep in mind if they're opening up their supervision to these broader regional areas?
Yes. I get so excited when I talk about the compacts. There's other compacts. So specifically what I'm going to be chatting about is the social work compact, although the counseling compact is hopefully right along with us. And when we move, they move. But not if, when our compacts go through, I am really excited about seeing how everything may change in this space. So I'll talk about the compacts first and hopefully utopia and future. And then I'll just talk about what happens if you don't want to wait and then you want to get licensed in a million other states like me. For me, the biggest things are, one, what the licensing compact will do for social work and counseling and whatever else is enable you to work across state lines in as many of the states that have approved the compact as possible. Currently, I think I saw yesterday, there was a 24th state, I believe it was Maryland, who ended up passing. So we're at nearly half the country right now, which is amazing. So that is going to give you the ability to practice across state lines. And what they mean by that in most states is clinical work. Not just clinical work with clients is what I mean. So your practice, whether that's a group practice, a private practice, community mental health across state lines, case management, insurance, regulatory stuff, anything that you're doing, you will likely be able to work with the clients in whatever state is fully good to go in those 24 states and hopefully more soon. But what it doesn't likely mean, at least what we're seeing, is that it's probably not going to mean that you can supervise or take insurance in every state. Now, what I'm hoping, because social work is the largest mental health profession by number, we beat out psychologists, LNFTs, and LPCs, our counseling friends, our marriage and family friends combined. We're massive. We have a lot of power. So I'm hoping, my utopia is that when all of these compacts pass, the insurance companies and the state boards are going to say, oops, we need to probably standardize a little more. We probably need to open this up to allow for things like insurance across state lines and being able to, if you live in Oregon, you can bill in Vermont or whatever. So I think it's really interesting to think about what it could be. But as of this exact moment, let's just say it, don't fall into the trap of this, like, you can just turn it into coaching and that counts. And you can work anywhere your client is. If you are thinking about getting into the supervision space or you're a supervisee looking for a supervisor, you need to make sure that you are licensed and able, whatever the state law in your state is, to provide those services. It cannot express how important it is and how much risk there is. If you are, especially, I think about like border towns, things that are on the border between two states, or I have a large military spouse supervisee crew, they have to move all the time. So I have to do my due diligence and make sure that if my person moves or if I move or whatever happens, that I am following that state wherever they are, the state law in wherever they are and wherever they're coming from, if they're continuing to pursue that license. So it does mean that I'm playing in the rules and the laws and the statutes. A lot of I know more states' laws than I should. It's insane. But I want to, like, the risk of your supervisee having hours that they faithfully did that may not count because you didn't do what you should have as their supervisor is not okay. And I have more examples than I could probably count where I have gone to the state and said, this company has lied to their supervisees and told them that they didn't need supervision or they were getting them one. It was just going to take them a minute. There was a wait list for a supervisor. If you are doing clinical work anywhere in this country, please make sure you have a supervisor on board. It's going to protect you. It's going to protect your clients, and it's going to make sure that you don't get in trouble with the board. But other than that, my like spiel on keeping yourself legal and safe, the benefits of opening up your supervision practice across state lines is massive. Not only for client work, if you're licensed in that state, then you can do work in that state. But if you have the ability, especially to me, states that don't have a high number of supervisors. So think about your rural states. Think about your states that are maybe further south, have typically a lot less, probably because the reimbursement rate is not as good as some of our northern rates. Those kinds of things, it can increase your potential income. It can allow you to just explode in terms of how many hours. And I really encourage people to think about the time zone change. So if you have big pockets of empty, you're not finding clients for the middle of the day, think about what other time zones, either later or earlier, that you might hit if you're in a different time zone than them, where you can actually pick up those people before they go to work or after they get off, where you're not really finding that in your own state. There's a lot of states with a lack of service providers. It is the healthcare provider shortage. If you look up that term, you can see where there are shortages across our country. Spoiler alert, there's quite a few that need people. So just think about not only for client care, but for supervision, being able to be licensed in many states. There's just no limit on what you can make monetarily or passion wise to explore and expand into other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And what supervision models or frameworks do you find most effective in strengthening clinical skills and professional development for the supervisees you're working with?
I'm a pretty eclectic therapist. I really like to pull in a lot of different types of modalities and a lot of frameworks into what I do. And that carries forward in my supervision practice. But if we're talking about particular kind of frameworks that I really infuse my supervision work with, it's going to be your person centered and your solution focused. Solution focus to me is one of the most important aspects that you can chat with your supervisee about. Because if you think about the nature of supervision, I am seeing them every week nearly for 2 years. But if they're having a problem with a client issue, challenge, concern, it's likely they're going to see them again before you see your supervisee again. So if they're doing therapy and they're seeing a client every single week, they're going to see that client again before you see them again. So you need that like more like solution focused, brief intervention. Here's some ideas. Here's some things to think about. Here's some things to try out. Let me know how it goes, and we can recheck in next week about that same thing. I feel like if you're a kind of long range therapist and you're setting things up to one day, that's going to be a little frustrating for your supervisee who may feel that urgency and that maybe even borderline kind of crisis or full on crisis of, no, I need help like today about what do I do with this person tomorrow. That solution focused, I think, is really smart thing to get in the mindset for. And then person centered, I've talked about this before, but I personally, and maybe a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I think one of the ways that I'm so effective with my clients and with my supervisees is that I'm a really transparent, honest, and like human. I tell you when things are going on that relate to you and relate to the session. I say, like, I'm having some tech difficulty. Like, my platform is like really hating me today. I will be there in 30 seconds. I swear. Like, I'm not going to just make you wonder and make you confused about what's going on. And I meet them where they are in the humanity, the mistakes, the challenges. I talk about my mistakes. I talk about my challenges, not to overrun what they're doing, but to validate and normalize that even though I'm their supervisee, I don't know all the answers. I haven't been through every client experience there is to have. Your clients aren't my clients. Maybe what I would do would be something completely different than what you do. So I want to make sure that they know that I'm like a real, let's say like a real boy, like Pinocchio, right? I'm a real person with my own set of real human traits that sometimes work really well with my clients and sometimes Bob. And I learn from them and I grow from them. And I think that if I'm ever at a point where I'm like, I'm done learning, I'm done growing, this is it, I've hit the max, then I need to kindly see myself out of this profession, because if I'm not growing, changing, evolving, improving, then I'm not maybe doing what I should. And I make my supervisees have that kind of knowledge, whether they want to follow me along the person-centered journey or not. But you get to be a human when you work with me. You get to make mistakes. You get to be late. You get to have a runny nose. You get to be out sick. You get to struggle. You get to have wins and celebrate those wins, client, personal, whatever. It's just a place that I think that supervision should be a place where you feel safe, comfortable, and able to talk about all of the worst aspects, thoughts, beliefs about yourself as a clinician. Don't hide that. from me, because that's not going to do anyone any favors and could probably impact your client outcomes and or your client lives at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe related to that, what do you see as some common pitfalls in supervision that can negatively impact client care? And how would guide current supervisors or aspiring supervisors to avoid those pitfalls?
I think some of the things we talked about before, but treating it as a therapeutic space or a managerial space. If you're doing your yearly evaluation as a supervision session, that's not what we're doing here. That's not the point of this. I would also say one of the things that I've seen, I've had a few supervisees come to me having been supervised by someone else. And one of the things that chills me maybe more than anything else is not giving them time or space to meet even. I've had supervisees that have said, I had worked with this person for a year and I think I saw them 10 times. No, most states have really firm and strict rules around that. But when you, and not only just pay me, but when you hire me to be this for you, you get an hour at least of my time every single week for at least 2 years. I've signed up with you to get you across the finish line, if at all possible, in my power. Give the supervisee the time, not only your time, as in the dedicated time that you said you can see them, but also I think you need to be available if they're in crisis, and hopefully it's super rare. And hopefully they have other supports. If you're in session or doing something else, they can have someone else to chat with. But give them the ability and the space to chat about what they need, to actually meet, to do what you're supposed to do. And as we've talked about, like if they're floating around in the process, give them a little more ownership, autonomy to make the decisions that they need to make for their own practice. Take this seriously. It is a serious venture. So avoiding those, I would say, treat it like a session, treat it like a client session that you are having somebody rely on you for that hour plus. And hopefully not. Hopefully they just need their hour and they're good to go and we'll see you next week. But having a little bit of that flexibility and understanding that if they're going through something and they trust you, that you may be spending every so often another 15, 30 minutes, even an hour game plan with them about something hard that came up for them. It's not the time to therapize. It's not the time to talk about dress code or you were 5 minutes late today to work. If it doesn't impact the client and clinical skills at the end of the day, save it for later. That's not what this is. And check in with your supervisee. I think doing an assessment or an evaluation is also really smart. Have them rate you on how this is going, or at least talk to you. I tell people whenever they hire me, we're going to do every 6 months, we're going to say, all right, I'm your supervisor for the first 6 months. We're going to get to know each other. We're going to do this work. And then we're going to check in and say, is this working for you? Am I providing you what you need? Is this helpful? What do you think? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything that I need more information or resources for to help support you better? And I give them an out. If this ain't it, much like therapy, right? I don't want to make you feel like you're boxed into like needing your supervisor for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You get a choice here. And so how am I doing? And asking that question out loud and making your supervisee say, what's good and what needs some work? And that's how I become a better supervisor.
Yeah. Yeah. So really making the space for feedback and really inviting that in and just being able to say, is this a good fit? That your responsibility is making sure they have the best supervisory experience, whether or not that's with you, but like actually creating the space, not putting that pressure, particularly because of the power dynamic that they're going to volunteer it, right? Like actually working it into the structuring of the supervision itself, which I think is probably very helpful and really invites people in to maybe say what I was hoping this thing could be explored and it hasn't really come up yet, or just how to I get a better sense of their expectations and what they need out of the supervisory process. Because I think much like our clients when they're coming to this work, that a lot of them don't know what to expect out of therapy, and a lot of people don't know what to expect out of supervision. So they're letting us as supervisors take the lead, and where
Yes.
some of those things might be invisible to us if they were really hoping there were elements that were they needed explored or skills they wanted to hone in on or ethical questions. So I do definitely appreciate that. How would you guide supervisors to find that balance, managing their own caseloads or if they're handling other administrative responsibilities while maintaining high quality supervision?
I may not make many friends when I say this, but I think high quality supervision is someone with a little more availability and flexibility than what most people who do this work. If you're working a 40-hour job, 50-hour, 60-hour job, and you do supervision as a side hustle, and no hate to that, I have 57 side hustles, please believe. But I think that this is important enough to make sure that you do have the time and energy and space to help people in the supervision process. So if you are one of those people that does like 40, 50 hour a week and there is no wiggle room in your week to meet with people, and you're meeting with your supervisees at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, and they only get that one, like Tuesdays at 6 p.m. is your time until 7. And then I'm doing something else because I'm so slam packed. I don't know that it can be what I determine to be a high quality supervision, because what happens when that person had a client who suicided, or a complaint, or someone ghosted them and they're worried about them, and they call you and it's 1 p.m. on a Tuesday and you're like, I'm not going to be able to get to that until we see each other, or we've already seen each other this week, so I'll talk about that with you next week. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully your supervisees aren't in just complete chaos all the time. That's not what this is to be for. It's not crisis management, but having the ability and the flexibility to be able to reach back out to them, to calm them down, to be with them when things are really hard, I think is a really mandatory or highly encouraged piece of the process. And it's why I created my company, why I did. I'm not in session most of the day. And my supervisees know that if I get a phone call and it's another supervisee, it's probably something significant. And I may need to dip out of our session for 5 minutes and answer that. And they know I would do the same thing for them. Not that I'm available 24/7, because I'm not, but if you call me in a general work day and the message is, oh my gosh, this thing happened, I really need to talk to you, I'm going to be available. The only times I don't pick up and the only times I am truly unreachable is when I'm in my client sessions. And that's okay. But I'm not doing that 40 hours a week. And I just don't know that this work can be done super well if you are so jam-packed full you can't even see straight. I give a little bit of grace to internal supervisors because I think that most often they're not given a choice. They're voluntold to do it. And maybe that is part of, you just have to really think about your time management. And I'm a really big fan of the question. You tell me that I have to supervise our new staff, Jane, or whatever, for her license. Then my question becomes, okay, which of these tasks would you like me not to do this week? Because I'm going to have to dedicate time and energy to Jane.
Yeah.
Make your life reasonable. If you're not advocating for yourself, your work certainly isn't going to take care of you in most instances. So say what you need. And maybe that looks like a time study or something, like, all right, I'm going to do this for a couple of weeks and see how much Jane needs me. And maybe it's only an hour a week, but maybe it's not. And then you can go back to your folks and say, look, this is just, it's bigger job than you think it is. And again, I've said this a lot, but I think that this work is so sacred and so important that it deserves a little bit of your time and energy, more than just it's not a call center job where you just pick up and hang up whenever the call's over.
Yeah. So it sounds like a couple things that to takeaways there is being able to recognize there is more flex time that needs to be thought about versus just the scheduled hours of supervision. That those are something that we need to be thinking about if we're taking on this responsibility. It sounds like the other piece is this really clear communication to our supervisees, like a pathway for escalation, right? These are the kind of things that you do not need to wait until our next supervised meeting time to get support around. And then also, I'm sure for the rare supervisee that there might be a little bit more nerves and dependency that's being fostered. These are the things that can wait until we meet again. We're sort of building a little bit of that distress tolerance in. And it sounds like that communication being available to supervisees of I will step out, I will make myself available if somebody reaches out, a supervisee reaches out, needing emergent support because I have already communicated and languaged it to all of you. These are the things that will be escalated and I will make myself available for. So it sounds like getting really clear on those boundaries and those expectations ahead of time, and then really doing a good job of communicating them across the board. It sounds like a big piece of it. And it sounds like also if people are doing this to diversify their income, doing that mindfully, that it's not just like packing in X amount of hours and for this like revenue, it's doing it with a thoughtfulness of, yes, an absolute opportunity to diversify your income and do something that is meaningful and impactful. And doing it well means really thinking about, okay, like how much time will I need to dedicate this to do this successfully and garnish referrals because people know that I'm doing a service that's like really contributing to the professional development of this new generation of clinicians, which is such a worthy endeavor.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So that being said, for clinicians who are interested in becoming supervisors, what steps do you think that they should take to ensure they are doing this ethically and clinically in a way where they can feel prepared and really excited to take this on?
Yeah. So first I would say is get friendly with your state board's website, with state statute. And I kind of joke in Texas that sometimes I feel like you need a law degree in order to understand what they're trying to say in those statutes. It is sometimes very like legalese, but generally, hopefully, in most states that I've seen, the board or the licensing, whoever owns the licensing avenue, there will be a specific either website or group on the FAQ or whatever that talks specifically about supervision and the process and the requirements and who you have to be a supervisor. Most often that bar is time. You just have to have been fully licensed for a while, but many of them make you take a course. Sometimes it's just a few hours, 4 or 6 hours. Sometimes it's Texas, which I think has the highest one that I've ever seen, which is we have to take a 40-hour course in order to become a supervisor, which is one of the things that I do is teach that 40-hour course. But know your laws and know what requirements you have to do and whether you meet them or not. So obviously that's just, can I do this? And then if the answer to that is absolutely, I have all those requirements and I'll take that course and I'll start this process, then think about who needs you, what information and experience and education that you have. You talked earlier about that niche of, is there something that you are very keyed into that you can provide really specific support and education to supervisees about? Find your people who are interested in that, bring them along, train them. I think a lot of people, if you're very specialized, bringing other people in, and to me, that's one of these amazing benefits of supervision is you build your own network. You build your own like Rolodex. Okay, for younger people, that's in a phone listing of all the people that you know. But you build all of the people that you know and you've trained them. So who else but the people that you had a hand in growing up in that niche or in that particular modality or in that way of doing things? You're building your own like referral system, which is so amazing because who knows what these clinicians will go on to do, what they'll create. Will they go into office? Will they become board members? Will they rule community mental health organizations or hospitals? The excitement of that is also, I never know where my folks will land. But what I do know is that I have prepared them with the laws, with the ethics, with the whatever their policies are, with insurance, whatever it is. I prepared them to be highly successful, thriving clinicians, social workers, and humans that take care of themselves, that know what they need to do to stay in compliance with all of those things, but also to have a really great life. So I think the benefits are endless. I think you can tell about how much I love this kind of work, but start at your state board, go from there. And if you do have questions, I'm like, I don't know. I'm just a person who loves digging around in laws. It's real weird. But if you have any questions about your state, feel free to reach out to me. I'm licensed in a lot of them, so I know the laws in a lot of them. And if I don't know it, I'll find out and do some digging and see if we can get you on a pathway to diversify that income, give back to our community, grow social workers into amazing clinicians, and have a good life yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And your passion really comes through in wanting to support clinicians in strategically diversifying their income and sort of supervision being one of those pathways. Anything else you want to leave our viewers with in thinking about that in terms of expanding someone's reach and their impact and their income using supervision or other pathways for professional diversification as a tool?
Yes. So I would just say quickly that I've had a lot of people reach out. I'm pretty active on Facebook in all of the different kind of therapy groups that there are. But I've had a few people reach out and they're like, tell me what I should do for more money and less clinical hours, less like therapy clients. My first question is, what do you want to do? What are you interested in? And I hope to make a pretty good case that no matter what that thing is, there is room for you in the social work profession, whether it's teaching, whether it's training, whether it's consulting, whether it's doing speaking gigs, whether it's doing supervision or working individually with clients in therapy and or coaching. Whatever you may want to do, I think that we are some of the most passionate, educated, amazing creatures. I love social workers. We can go on to work in just about any type of workplace and be successful because of our skills, knowledge, and abilities. So do some self-reflection and do some digging into things that do excite you. Look in a mirror when you're talking about those things. And as you can probably see if you're watching this, you see my eyes light up. You see my smile get bigger. You see my energy gets bigger when I talk about the things that I love to do because I love them. And if what you're doing, if you're thinking about your current income or your current workplace or whatever, and it drains you rather than fills your cup, take a minute, take a weekend day and just think about all of the things that you like and things that have interested you and try and find one small step that you can take. And if it feels good, take another one and then take another one. And just really quickly, I have taught, I do supervision, I do therapy. I have a retreat business that does continuing education internationally. I'm going to Greece in 3 weeks and I'll be there for 2 weeks working in my own company, paying myself and getting paid myself. Really fun. I do consulting work with the government. I'm just someone who decided that the box that they put me in was not one that I was going to keep living in. And I took a step out and there's a lot of risk and it's very scary, but it may just be the thing that you need to do to live your best life. And I think it's out there. And I don't think that it's naive idiocy that is making me say that. I actually think it's true. And I think anyone can do what I've done.
Yeah,
It's not,
I love
easy,
that.
but it's possible.
And I think you mentioned earlier that in a lot of these helping professions, these are often women-dominated fields. And I think a lot of the messages women get and other people of marginalized identities, whether that BIPOC people of color, generally gender diverse folks, that we're not supposed to necessarily speak to our strengths and we're not supposed to name them and we're supposed to be humble and quiet. And that I think that also lends itself to a lot of we only pursue something if we feel like we get the external validation that we're good at it or it's a strength of ours or we get invited in to do something. And I think a lot of what you're speaking to is creating your own opportunity by you understanding your own value and your worth and your gifts and your contributions. And I love that sort of call to action of starting to rehearse that in the mirror and speak it out loud and practice speaking it out loud and breathing life into the things that excite you and light you up. Because I think we get a lot of societal messaging that we've internalized that it very much is counter to that and has really been to our own detriment. So I think, your voice and you're by a testament of like how you are organizing your profession and your education and understanding the organizational systemic issues that actually do burn people out and disempower folks. I think it's just a really good insight that we can all take away of just really thinking about that. Can you let our listeners know how do they find you and contact you and learn more about this important work that you're doing?
Yes, thank you. Email is always a great one. My retreat company is called The Crane and the Bull. So hello at The Crane and the Bull is a great email address for me, but I'm also all over the internet, although Ashley Stevens is not the most unique name. So SW Supervision course. So that's supposed to be social work supervision course, but SW Supervision course is Instagram, is LinkedIn, is online, swsupervisioncourse.com. And thecraneandthebull.com are my two companies and all over the place. So you should be able to find me at those two pretty easily.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this great conversation. It's so lovely to talk to you, Ashley.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining our community on the Affirming Minds podcast. If you loved this episode as much as we did, please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and share it on your socials. If you want more information about how this podcast can add to your continuing education credits, visit affirmmentalhealth.com. And remember, let's affirm, heal, and grow together.